You were sent to be concerned about law and order?
Yes.
For that you needed police officers?
Yes.
The police officers that you were sent didn't arrive until later, and then they were put on training. The priority was training, which meant presumably that little was being done about law and order. So the law and order situation was deteriorating for a variety of reasons that you have mentioned, which made it more dangerous for police officers to be deployed from the United Kingdom. So we can start to see a sort of vicious cycle here. You deal quite a bit in your statement about the problems of force protection. So we don't need to go into detail on that, but you may just want to say something about the sort of protection that you were given and how the risk assessments that you thought might be sensible, prudent, matched those that were being seen for police officers back in London.
I think I said at the beginning, and I still maintain this, that if the police were there in sufficient numbers and were given sufficient support from the army in terms of cover, and I'll talk about civilian protection teams in a second, then I think there was a very feasible method of operations. I mean, you had the ridiculous situation where, as a very senior chief police officer, I was flying on my own to the scenes of murders. I mean, the chief of police of Maysan province was assassinated coming out of the mosque. I went to that scene on my own in the back of a Chinook, literally on my own. Of course, the military then picked me up and took me to the scene. If I had had even 2 or 3 investigators, or those who were involved in murder investigations who could have dealt with either the forensics or the scene of crime, at least which could have made some contribution, to send someone like myself without any support to very serious incidents which would have political ramifications in the whole province, I think says everything. I was going to the scene of an attack in Basra city station with one person, a young sergeant who was acting as my staff officer. So it is clear to me that if we are going to make any contributions, even checking the situation of the evidence gathering, or checking the rights of any prisoners and so on in custody, there needs to be more than one person. I was interfacing perhaps with the chief of police or interfacing with the military, in terms of, I mean the British military, in terms of what we could do. So as well as needing the extra police, we definitely needed security to move around, and the model that I have been used to most of my life is with the British Army. However, the Army, I think, like any organization, puts its resources to where it gets most effect, and, if they saw me or my 2 Ministry of Defence police officers as not contributing much, I guess they were loath to continually just send me 2 Land Rovers with infantrymen to go and visit police stations or to go to talk to battle group commanders or whatever. It was, again, a resource choice. Therefore, the breakthrough, when the CP teams, the close protection teams, were allocated to the staff meant that we did have a certain amount of freedom of movement, but, with the greatest will in the world, 2 armoured vehicles with perhaps 4 bodyguards is never going to have the strength or give the support that military resources will do.
You were the subject of a BBC documentary called Basra Beat, and in the programme made some comments about the willingness of the UK to offer police support to Iraq, and, after this programme was aired, you said that you felt unsupported and isolated, but for the stark exception of 2 people. We know who those 2 people are from your statement, but whom did you feel unsupported by?
Unsupported by.
Unsupported.
I have evidence obviously of emails that were sent. I have evidence of how I was perceived by others. It was not complimentary. I'm an honest man, and NAFCO and my own force had given permission to the media to follow me in this documentary. I suppose what I was trying to say is not only was I unsupported about the documentary, I felt unsupported about the statement I made, which was, I felt embarrassed, uncomfortable that I was here, as if somehow I was expendable or my Ministry of Defence colleagues were expendable or the men and women who were working with me and dealing with schools or health and other issues, or the Danish police. Somehow it was okay for us to be there, but it was too dangerous for other British police officers, and I was trying to explain. And of course, it went down extremely badly and I regret making that statement now, but it is how I felt at the time, and the fact that, you know, one knows when you are getting slaps on the back and when you are being avoided, and rather than go into details of what I read and what I heard and so on, It is clear to me that no one was rushing to my support, with the exception of the people I mentioned.
The overall sense you give is that the job we were sent to do, which was helping with the position within the whole southeast, particularly looking at Basra, was a very low priority itself, that, when we talk about the security situation deteriorating, this tends to be in terms of threats to coalition forces, but actually it was a bigger problem within Basra itself, and that really very little is going to be done about it during this period because the resources were not being put into that particular problem.
Yes. There is a difference between firefighting and strategic change or planning for strategic change. It is clear that a lot of people, and I'm talking about the British Army and those other coalition forces, were expending a huge amount of energy trying to keep Basra calm. That included those engineers working on infrastructure and fuel and all those other things. In terms of policing, I can only say the facts speak for themselves. If you have only got one British police officer and 2 Ministry of Defence police officers for 5 months, what does it say about the priority being given to the situation? Despite the fact, the rhetoric was, the South must not fail, the South must be a success. So that's why we were expending so much energy trying to look at ways in which, how could we use 100 people, or, if we had 50, how could we use 50, and, if we get 20, don't put them all in training, let's use them in some other way.